to the original amendment will be typed to the council's office and put up on the screen. We will now proceed with the Rule 12 amendments. Is there a motion to amend the rules?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
I call on Mrs. Mickelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask that the body take up rule amendment submitted under Rule 12, amendment to rule number 16 that was submitted to the council's office.
On the board yet? Okay. Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that there has been one issue.
Actually, if we could, let's go ahead and get a second to your motion. Is there a second from? Okay. Jeff Johnson. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Mickelson. Point of order.
I noticed that some people are taping this, and I don't know whether these meetings should be taped because we'll see them on YouTube and places that we don't need to see them. And I think people should have the right to see freely, and the taping is being made in the future.
You're out of order. Dr. Fisher is an open press meeting. Mrs. Mickelson, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment came about pursuant to a discussion of the Conservative Steering Committee, where as we talked about a number of the issues that people were concerned about, the recurring issue that kept being brought up was the lingering bad feelings among a number of people in our party about Rule 16 came out of the Tampa Convention. And as I talked with a number of people who said, I'd like to see something changed on Rule 16, I don't want to see everything that the convention did tossed out, I put forward this amendment to allow us to let the people at home know that we're listening, that we're sensitive to their concerns, but at the same time, we're not going to rewrite history by pretending that the convention in Tampa didn't take place. I believe, Mr. Chairman, that it is an extremely dangerous precedent to set. To say that a duly elected representative body that met under their rules, that met under the rules that we created, somehow everything that they did was improper and null and void. And so, Mr. Chairman, I submit this. I understand that there is a friendly amendment that's going to be offered, and I think this would be the appropriate time to do that.
For purposes of offering the amendment to the proposal, Mr. Barbour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Henry Barbour Amendment. I would like to offer a friendly amendment to the motion without subject to the original motion. This amendment offers a substitute to the original offered rule amendment, a copy of which I believe is about to be distributed to each member, and I move for its adoption.
Is there a second to Mr. McCall?
Mr. Chairman, I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay, we'll proceed with discussion. Who wants to start?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Barbour?
Thank you. Certainly, Rule 16A2 is what this amendment, this substitute amendment deals with. This is a rewrite of 16A2, which I believe we all recall in Tampa was a controversial rule. When it was originally offered, the language was grossly overreaching. It would give a campaign, a presidential campaign, a veto over delegates. And I think all of us who do value grassroots, who do value our state parties, we don't want any campaign from a state party. No, we're going to pick your delegates. We veto this person, we veto that one. And that was unacceptable. And it is something that we did undo out there. We are offering this because we believe this language will help clarify. It is written very cleanly, and it is made very plain that our intention is to make certain that bound delegates vote the way they're supposed to according to the state party rule and state law. And we also add a line in here just for real strong clarity that no presidential candidate shall have the power to remove a delegate. And we do that for the purpose of addressing the issue that did concern me. And it was one of the reasons I stood up and fought this in Tampa when it was originally proposed. And I think it concerned most of the people in the room in Tampa. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hogler.
Parliamentary inquiry. What happens if a proposed amendment or a motion directly conflicts with the existing rule?
Mr. Wilkowski. Mr. Hogwood, your inquiry's hypothetical, and we're not going to deal with it at this time. Mr. Misteri?
Objection. I object to the consideration of this measure.
You're on the rule.
Mr. Chairman, point of inquiry. Is the matter on the table now simply the amendment, Rule 16A2 is put by Mr. Barbour, or is the entire amendment that includes the 16.2 that changes the word from may to shall on the table? I couldn't understand from the discussion if they accepted the amendment to the proposed amendment, and if we're moving forward on just one section. And the reason for my point of inquiry is that we're talking about the entire amendment I'd like to speak against.
Mr. Barbour, if you could address this question.
No, this would be offered as a substitute amendment for Enid's proposed amendment. So this would only deal with 16A2. That's separate.
Is there further discussion on the amendment?
Point of order.
Yes, sir.
The amendment was offered by Mr. Barbour, accepted as friendly by Ms. Mickelson. I don't believe there needs to be any further discussion.
Well, we certainly have to have further discussion if the members want to on the amendment. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote on the amendment offered by Mr. Barbour, which should be up on the screen.
Point of order again, Mr. Chairman. The amendment was offered as a friendly amendment by Mr. Barbour. Ms. Mickelson accepted it as friendly. We don't require a vote on this. It is now part of the amendment that Ms. Mickelson has made.
That was my
She offered, she accepted it as friendly. Mr. Barbour offered it, she accepted it as friendly.
Mr. Chairman, point of inquiry, the reason I was asking that point of information was for that point, because if it's already part of her amendment, I'd like to speak against her amendment. So if your ruling is part of her amendment, I'd like to speak against her amendment if you're not having a separate vote. I just don't want to miss the debate. They promised you entertainment, didn't they? We can't leave without some.
Had a real Texan love boots.
Mr. Minister, go ahead with your opposition.
Well, I stand in opposition to the amendment because it changes the word may to shall, and that...
I think I could probably be helpful here. My amendment has been completely substituted by this language. So strike out 1, 2, 3, you can delete and 4, and substitute this language. Because I believe that this takes care of the problem in a better way than my original one.
Is there any objection to the substitute amendment? Questions been called for? All those in favor of moving to a vote, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. All those in favor of the substitute amendment offered by Mr. Barbour or Mrs. Mickelson's proposed amendment, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. The ayes have it. Are there any other rules that have been properly submitted in advance? Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that my proposed amendment has been distributed. It was proposed prior to the Charlotte meeting, but now at your desk, it doesn't happen to have my name typed on it for whatever reason, the copy that was distributed, but it is, I can read it short. Pursuant to Rule 12, Rule 1 through 11, and 13 to 25 of the Republican National Committee are hereby amended to be the rules adopted by the 2008 Republican National Convention as subsequently amended by the Republican National Committee pursuant to Rule 10D, and further as unanimously recommended on August 23rd, 2012 by the Republican National Committee, and that Rules 1 through 11 and 13 through 25 be changed.
Okay, is there a second to the motion? Second. Second by Mr. Snack of Nevada. Please proceed, Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you. There has been an enormous outrage over certain things which happened at the Tampa Convention, and which were evidenced by the enormous opposition to the adoption of the rules by the convention, the rules that were supported by the Convention Rules Committee. There is, and every person in this room is aware of it, still an enormous unrest over this. In my judgment, and I've been frank to say that it was a power grab by Ben Ginsberg, who accurately described himself as the Romney campaign leader on the Convention Rules Committee. And there is considerable outrage, and we have, I believe, here an opportunity to demonstrate to grassroots people that we want to join the Republican Party, that we reject this matter of power grab. And so that's what my proposal would do. I've handed out to you a multi-page thing here, which includes the text of the rules changes as the rules would read from what they are now, going back to the provisions that were adopted unanimously by the Republican National Committee the day before the Rules Committee meeting. I think a clear break, a clear repudiation of what was done there is important. Many people have described what was happening as an outrage. It's been described as a travesty. There's hardly a negative term that hasn't been described, that hasn't been used to describe this. And we have the opportunity to pass this resolution, and then, after we have passed it, those elements of the rules which were changed, which are not objectionable, can easily be added onto the rules, so we do not lose any of the good work of the Convention Rules Committee. But I think we need a clear demonstration to the grassroots people we want in our party that we are not in favor of concentrating power. We want power to flow from the bottom up. We want to treat newcomers fairly, politely, and where possible, cordially. And I think this needs to be done. And we've all received a lot of emails on it. I've also had distributed to you a letter dated April 8th that is signed by 64 conservative movement leaders, starting off with Ed Meese and including Grover Norquist and Phyllis Schlafly and many others who are historic supporters of the Republican Party. They see that this is important. I believe we should take this opportunity to come out of this convention saying we have done something constructive and the Republican Party welcomes newcomers. And this is our opportunity to do it. And I urge you, please, to do this. Chairman Priebus has told me that he would support a record vote on my proposal, and I'm going to request a record vote on this so that we all have an opportunity to express ourselves, and so that everybody can know how we vote on this matter of repudiating the power grabs that took place in Tampa. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is there additional discussion? Mr. Monastery.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on behalf of myself and the entire delegation, we'd like to stand with Morton, and I plan to speak till I can speak no more. Just joking. I don't think it's any accident that probably, arguably, the two most grassroots parties in the RNC, the state of Virginia, which I understand has had as many as 18 or 20,000 grassroots delegates at their state convention in the past, and Texas, which did have the largest state convention this year, we have 18,000 delegates and alternates, that those two parties, which try to really pay attention to their grassroots, are in the same position on this. We are getting hundreds and hundreds of emails from delegates to our state convention. Every one of them wants us to go back to the prior rules. As I've traveled the state of Texas, and I do that extensively, everybody, at every meeting we get asked about this. I have yet to have a single person in our state tell us that they want to maintain their current rules. So if we're going to truly be a grassroots party, I think we need to listen to our grassroots. I understand the arguments that some make that this is not against the grassroots, but I have news for y'all, it's interpreted that way. So I think we need to make a strong statement that this party is not top-down, this party is bottom-up, and guess what? We listen. And wasn't that what the Growth and Opportunity Project is supposed to be all about? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of Mr. Blackwell's amendment. As we heard during the Conservative Steering Committee breakfast, we've got a very libertarian younger generation coming on. A lot of them are already members of our party, and they're starting to feel a little bit homeless because of the top-down mentality that they're perceiving because of the rules that were passed in the 2012 convention. We can still adjust these rules if we go back to the 2008 rules under Rule 12 up until September 30, 2014. We can still incorporate some of the good things that were brought in the 2012 convention and reincorporate them into these rules. But we have a really great opportunity here to send a clear and concise message to the grassroots of this party that we are listening and that we are going to take this opportunity to make these changes today and go back to 2008 rules. I mean, to be honest, let's look at it this way. The 2012 rules didn't help Mitt Romney any more than 2008 rules helped John McCain. But what we do need to do is that we can show that we're listening to our grassroots. That gives us a fantastic opportunity to do that. In the eyes of the grassroots, this is what we need to do. We need to support Morton Blackwell's amendment. We need to pass this, and we need to move it to the body of the RNC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stern. Additional discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes Henry Barbour, Mississippi.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate Mr. Blackwell's long service to the Republican National Committee. And some might argue it makes you part of the establishment. And we know better. We're better than you. You know, I rise in opposition, as you might suspect, to this. I think it is a gross overreach to try to undo what a lot of good people did in Tampa. And I think to mischaracterize it the way that some have, I think is inaccurate. It's unfair, it is divisive. We need to grow our Republican Party by addition, multiplication, not subtraction and division. That ain't real complicated. And, you know, certainly some of the rules that we dealt with in Tampa, including 16A2, where we're trying to make certain that bound delegates vote the way they are bound to vote, honors the will of the voters. The voters are the ultimate grassroots, and we should not forget that. We also have, we also have many good rules that did pass in Tampa. The large majority of them did not come from, quote, the Romney campaign. Certainly a handful did. And as I said before, 16A2, when the Romney campaign brought forth that, I was the person who stood up after it had passed and fought it and successfully defeated it with the help of obviously the members of that committee. And I think it is inaccurate, unfair to try to cast one part. If you're not for this, you're obviously opposed to the grassroots. I think that is an outrageous and inaccurate comment for people to make. We're all for the grassroots. We're all for the voters. And the rules that we passed in Tampa honor what happens in primaries. And we need to value what happens in primaries as well as in caucuses and state conventions. We want to have more participation, not less participation. But, Mr. Chairman, I oppose Mr. Blackwell's amendment, and I hope the committee will join me in voting it down.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Thank you very much.
Well, at this point, I'm not angry at anybody, but I do have some questions. First, I find it pernicious to have any nominee to have the right to oppose his own particular friends on the Rules Committee at a national convention. And I understand it's a relatively recent phenomenon, and not much good can come from it. Presidential nominees are temporal. Even if they win, they're only going to be around for 8 years. And this RNC body, the Rules Committee, is organic. It changes, but it's got historical memory, it's got a purpose, and suddenly, when there's a national convention, hardly anybody in this room is on that Rules Committee. And I find that very troublesome. But my question is for Morton. I'm happy, I think, about the changes in Rule 16A. I don't like the idea of a national rule being imposed on 50 states and territories and basically dictating to them how to treat rogue delegates. I know how they treat them in Texas. They disappear. I believe strongly in state options. I don't want a top-down rule of any kind. So I'm not entirely happy with the rule change in 16A. It seems kind of like a smelly compromise of some type. But Mr. Blackwell, who I studied under as a teenager,
college graduate.
I just have a question. Why are the rules, and this is my first meeting on Rules Committee, so I have a right to ask a dumb question. Why are the rules significantly better that were adopted in 2008 than they are today? I mean, that was McCain. He kind of ran the Rules Committee, as I understand it. So why are they better, and what are we losing? What will we gain specifically? Give me just 2 or 3 specifics. What do we gain if we adopt your resolution and go back to 2008? I'm not even sure what the benefits, the pluses or the minuses are.
Mr. Blackwell, you will actually be addressing me for the answer to Mr. Steele's question.
Mr. Chairman, there were a number of reforms that were introduced to amend the 2008 rules in the period running up to the 2012 convention. A number of those were proposals All right. Well, you pay attention with Chairman. Among those proposed changes, which were designed and passed for the purpose of opening up the authority for more power to rise from the bottom up rather than the top down, were a change in the election of a change in how you select the chairman of the resolutions committee. It would go from appointed as it had been to elected, and also the chairman of the budget committee. The rules that were passed unanimously by the Republican National Committee on the day before the Convention Rules Committee would have the chairman of the budget committee elected rather than appointed, which was the case. A number of those reforms, some of them minor, none of them earth-shaking, because the power of the Republican National Chairman is immense, as everybody in this room knows. He controls the staffing, he controls who gets which state party and which candidates get very substantial support by the Republican National Committee. It has so many powers, but some reasonable reforms that allow more power to flow from the bottom up were desirable. A number of those were passed. Many of them were advanced by Jim Barbour, and they got passed. I advanced some of them. When the Convention Rules Committee came, these reforms, which were designed to decentralize the party just a little bit and open it up a little bit more for power to flow from the bottom up, Ben Ginsburg systematically got those reforms yanked out of the rules, and then did a number of things that went beyond the reforms which had been proposed and made other changes. And it enraged people. It absolutely enraged people. And people who were there, maybe for their first convention, saw what was happening, and you will remember the outrage on the floor of the convention, so that the voice vote on the convention floor regarding adoption of the Convention Rules Committee report was almost equal, the yeas and the nays. This unrest continues. There are important issues here, but more important probably than any single issue is that we send from this meeting the news out to those people that we want to draw into our party, who are ready to, in many cases, become active. People who are in the Tea Party, people who are libertarians, movement conservatives, like those who signed that letter that I handed out to you all earlier. We need to send a signal that power grabs and concentrations of power are not what the Republican Party is about. Someone read earlier from the preamble, Mr. Chairman, that we are the party of the open door. Well, let's show that we're not the party where entrance is made possible only by a restricted distribution of tickets. Let's keep it an open party. And so that's why this is so important. The individual things, changes in the rules, many of them are significant. But right now, we need to build a majority party, and we can do that only by encouraging people from all these different categories to come in and be active and say, there's a place for you in the party, and we want you to participate. And if you participate, you can have actually some impact on what goes on within the Republican Party. That's what this is all about. The conservative movement understands this, the libertarians understand this, the Tea Party people understand this, and that is why I think it is necessary for us to make these changes. Then we can go back. We can go back today, or we can go back at the next meeting and recover those developments of the work of the Convention Rules Committee, which are worthwhile. We spent much of the last 2 days in discussions about the possible amendment where we exempt certain aspects of the Rules Committee work from the effect of my motion. I was very interested in that, participated in that discussion with the chairman up to 5 minutes before this meeting began. And I wanted to do it if it were possible. I want this meeting to come out as the big news that the grassroots are welcome and that power grabs are not what we are about. And we can do that. It failed of a consensus. What we had, I'll tell you who was there in the room. Let me tell you who's in the room. I think it's for a good while we had Chairman Priebus, we had our General Counsel, John Ryder, we had Jim Bock there, I was there, A.J. Spiker from Iowa was there, and Henry Barbour was there. And we worked on this to the point where we exempted several elements of what the Convention Rules Committee did from the effects of my motion. And the idea being that we could come up with an amendment which I could accept, my own motion, which is weaker. And we had an agreement that everybody was pretty much in agreement except Mr. Barbour. And Mr. Barbour didn't want to do that. And so we had a recess. And they came back to me with a proposal which included the various exemptions from the effect of my resolution we come up with, plus 2 more of them, both of them power grabs put forward by Ben Ginsburg. One of them, the matter that we have dealt with already, and I wasn't willing to go further than that, because I can't go back and say I acquiesced at the last minute in the incorporation of 2 more of Ben Ginsburg's power grabs. So that is where we are. I urge you to vote this in favor of this. It's in the best interest of the party. It will encourage people to participate, and it's not going to hurt the party in any way for us to do this. It's an opportunity that we have, and I ask please for support.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. How about limiting these outbursts by gentlemen from Virginia? He's just talking on and on and on. He's repeated himself about 50 times.
Thank you very much. It's an important issue. I want to make sure that we have the ability, even if there is repetition, and unless there is a motion to limit debate, we're going to continue giving people as much time as they can. Mr. McCall, South Carolina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the grassroots. I think that we do need to show them that they're welcome and we hear them. Not only do I serve my great state of South Carolina on this committee, I also am a county party chair to show how much the grassroots mean to me. And because of that, I think that we should not vote on this amendment. I'm against it. Doing something hastily. I think we need to take time. There's no rush to do anything today because I think there are a number of elements that are good in the rule. I don't want to see us coming back. I think we can go methodically through the process. I think it would serve to show those that signed this letter that Committeeman Blackwell distributed, that we're going to take our time to look at each rule and change those, because we don't have to have this work done, if I'm not mistaken, until 2014. And if we were today, suspend these rules we have on the Budget Committee, I think we have a male and female for each region, that would eliminate that. I've also served our great nation 24 years in the Air Force. I served in the First Gulf War over the skies of Iraq. So I think we need to preserve within these rules the support of the military. Secondly, so I would ask and I would urge you to please let's take time. There's no need to do anything today. We hear the grassroots, we support the grassroots, but we're going to do this in a methodical process. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Evans.
Point of order is,
If you could just identify, I know you're from Georgia, but Randy Evans.
Randy Evans from the committeeman from Georgia. So since we adopted the earlier amendment, isn't Mr. Blackwell's proposal now out of order since he would be amending rules that no longer exist? Yeah, because we amended Rule 16. We changed Rule 16. That's now the governing rule. So the amendment, he would have to, I think, submit a revised amendment to address the rules now adopted by the committee.
The ruling from the chair is that we'll proceed with the debate on this, take a vote on Mr. Blackwell's set of amendments, and see where it lays.
Well, I'm just curious as how that would then work. How would that work? Because his amendment would then...
Potentially, this would supersede what we just did.
That's a fair point. If the ruling of the chair is, for everybody here, so the net effect of the Morton Amendment is to repeal the rules that we just adopted, which address the issue that the grassroots have raised. And I think all the committee needs to understand that's the ruling of the chair, which is that in effect, you support Mr. Blackwell, you will have effectively repealed the very solution that the grassroots all asked for.
Mr. Kent, Washington State.
Yes, Jeff Kent, National Committee Man from Washington State. And it's with a great deal of reverence and a great deal of respect that I rise to speak in opposition to the gentleman from Virginia's motion on the floor. And there's two reasons why I'm opposed to Morton's substitution amendment. The first one is because it's a blanket activity. We're taking 24 rules all at the same time and casting them aside and replacing them with 24 other rules. Now, I don't know if I agree or disagree with any of the particular positions Mr. Blackwell takes on any of the individual rules. The truth is, we're not talking about that. I don't know what they are. I don't know if I would disagree or agree with them on that. I have to vote against this amendment because A, it's a blanket amendment that just tosses these aside without really getting into the meat of the matter is what's right or wrong with the rules. I would welcome that debate, and I would welcome for us to go through that process and do it properly. So to just take all these and cast them to the wind simply because we had some argument with, some supposed argument with the supposed process that we used to adopt them, I think is fundamentally wrong. The second reason that I'm speaking in opposition to this is because these rules were adopted, like them or not like them. They were adopted by a process that grows from the grassroots. That is a much more grassroots-oriented process than the one we're taking right now. There was 2 members from every state elected to go to the National Convention. They spent their own money, their own time. They spent 4 days in a room going over all of these rules and coming to a conclusion on them and adopting them. That's the ultimate, the National Convention and that process is the ultimate work of our grassroots. So for us as 168 members, just to take all of that work and throw it aside and substitute for some rules that were adopted back in 2008, I think actually does what Morton's claiming he's trying to fix, and that is ignore the will of the grassroots. So I would encourage us to vote this down, and if anybody has a problem with any of the individual rules that we're trying to deal with, stand up and make an amendment to those, and let's talk about them on the merits of that rule, and not the idea that we're just going to cast them all away. And
North Carolina. Dr. Ada Fisher from North Carolina. I rise to a point of massive confusion. What happened in North Carolina? I have received approximately 200 emails, and 90% of them were against what we just did and in favor of Mr. Blackwell. However, of that 90%, most of those people don't participate in day-to-day party operations, so they don't get hurt. And so I'm split because I was involved in negotiating Rule 16 because it's important that delegates be bound on how they were elected. There were a lot of people who came who wanted the right to change who they were going to vote for when they got to the convention, and that would be unfortunate. But on the other hand, I never saw these rules till the convention. So people were talking about we had a right, we had time to look at it. I never saw half the stuff at the convention until I got there. Because we, as a body, I wasn't on any committee, which is in violation of one of our rules that says every delegate should be on a committee within 2 years. I never got on any committee till this year. So we don't even follow our own rules.
But one of the things that is very important is I think Henry's rule is great. But I think Martin Blackwell's points are also well taken. When you move from electing folks to give different tasks to appointing everybody, if the chair don't like you, you don't get heard. And that's the reality of politics. The other reality of politics is this party did not lose because of Romney or Ginsburg or whatever else it is. We lost for a whole lot of other reasons. And one of the things that we have to understand is let's take some blame for it. We cannot, as a party, concede to whoever our candidate is the right to dictate what happens. And we did that. We did it repeatedly. We did it with McCain, we did it now. We have to say this is what we want in the party, rather than say, though you are our candidate, we support you. And some stuff I don't always agree with. And then half the stuff I say, y'all don't agree with me. So I think that one of the realities is we have to grow up as a party and re-exert control to make sure that we have heard those still silent voices that have been too neglected. 2 points of personal privilege. In North Carolina, I would not be braggadocious if I said I'm probably one of the few people who's been in all 100 counties of our state. And I've listened to what they say. And what they say is not what I hear us saying. They want a different kind of America, they want a different kind of party, and they want a different kind of voice. I also know that we had this listening tour. And when I listen to the people in the tour, look around you, there ain't but 3 of us who black in the RNC. And that's an issue. There are so many who are Hispanic, and I don't care how you change the rule, that ain't gonna change because of the way we operate the party. So we have to figure out some way to get input from other people. I support Henry's rule. I agree. I don't know what I'm doing when we get ready to vote. But one of the things that we have to do, I'd be willing to table this if you promised that we were going to address each rule, so many rules in each meeting. And if you're not going to do that, we'll be 2014 trying to run and solve the problem at the last minute. And if you're not going to give a complete average to every rule, because I can just walk and I can read all that stuff at one time and understand. So we ought to have a commitment as a rules committee that we're going to take 4 or 5 rules in each meeting and go through and say, do these things really work? And I don't know that they do. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. Mr. Chairman, Mark Lewis, National Committee of the Great State of Maine. I rise in favor of Mr. Blackwell's amendment today for the following reasons. One reason, back in January 2013, the state of Maine passed a resolution that I brought forth to the winter meeting. In that resolution, the state of Maine flatly rejected the 2012 rules altogether. Reading the vote off a teleprompter and with the ayes and the nays too close to call is something that we can do better at. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable that rules passed by a teleprompter being read from the podium, when the ayes and the nays are too close to call, we have to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, is this really what we stand for? We are better than this. And we stand for the grassroots, at least I think we do. And the grassroots is here today. Would the grassroots please stand up? Outside of the RNC, those people behind me are an army. And as an army, you do not want to lose Mr. Chairman. They are an army that work for free. They work for free. But you know what I'm getting at. You know what I'm getting at. They're not members of the RNC. They've come out here for their own expense. They've come out here to support us and to get these rules overturned. I rise in support of Gordon Blackwell. At the convention, one last point. At the convention in Tampa, I was one of 10 delegates from Maine that had my delegation credentials stripped. I didn't get a chance to vote on these rules, for or against. I didn't get a chance to vote against them in Tampa, but I have a chance to vote against them now. And I rise in support of Gordon's amendment, and thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Jay Shepard, Committee Man from Vermont. I'm new, so I
won't talk a lot. Once I'm here 20 years, and I will take more time. Being new, I received a lot of feedback, and I asked for feedback in Vermont on a regular basis. Last weekend, I invited the Liberty Republicans of Vermont and the Tea Party Republicans of Vermont to come to an open forum, town hall conversation to talk about these rules. They were the most vocal organization that supported Mr. Blackwell's rules change. We sat down and we went over each and every rule that's being asked to be changed. After a lot of conversation, the only rule they really had a problem with was 16. And I think we solved that problem. And when I go back to Vermont, those people are going to understand that yes, we did something. And yes, it was a good thing to do. And I also sat here and listened very attentively to Mr. Blackwell talking about 2008 versus 2012. I found nothing that was stated or in these rules that 2008 is any better than 2012. So going back to something that doesn't further our cause and bring people into the party doesn't make any sense. Therefore, I'm against this rule change.
Rob Gleason, I'm chairman of Pennsylvania. You know, I think in terms of Tea Party, grassroots, have been conservative, have been thrown around here rather loosely. To be a Republican in Pennsylvania, all you have to do is register Republican. We have 3.1 million Republicans in Pennsylvania. I had maybe 10 or 20 reach out to me about this, Mr. Blackwell's proposal, and several of them are from out of state. So, you know, we have a wonderful grassroots in Pennsylvania. We have a we are down by 1,200,000 in registration. We have a Republican senator. We have a Republican governor. We have a Republican House. We have a Republican Senate. 13 out of our 19 congressmen are Republicans. We control 55 of the 67 courthouses, and we're down by 1.2 million. I think that's grassroots operations. There's nothing wrong with our party. We just need to work. We've got to get together. We have to work. We are not defined by the president. This is what has happened to us here. We are defined, I think, what goes on in local elections. We are defined by the fact that we have the House, that we have 30 governors, that we have 27 state legislatures. Let's not let a few people define us the wrong way. So I oppose Mr. Blackwell. We've got to keep moving ahead and not get caught up in all these rules things. And we did go over the rules. Vote by vote. I've been for 6 years. We went over every rule, one by one. If we have to do it again, we will. Let's move ahead and let's get off the rules business.
Mr. Ryder, Tennessee.
John Ryder, National Committee Man from Tennessee, and I'm speaking as National Committee Man from Tennessee. Because I just couldn't stand sitting back there not saying anything all this time. It was starting to work on me a little bit. First, let me make a technical point. There's been a lot of discussion about reverting to the rule, the 2008 convention rules. That is not what this amendment proposes. It would not go back to the 2008 rules. Rather, it would go back to the rules that were adopted by this committee, recommended to the RNC, adopted by the full RNC at its summer meeting in Tampa immediately prior to the convention, and then those would become the rules, not the 2008 convention rules. So the effect of this amendment is to vest in this committee the full power to adopt the rules of the Republican National Party, and not to give any power to any convention or the people represented at any of the conventions of the Republican Party. Mr. Blackwell quite rightly says we need to send a signal. And I think that the amendment that we adopted earlier sends that signal. It deals with some very specific issues. The Secretary of the Convention shall faithfully announce and record each delegate's vote. That addresses a concern that arose in the last convention about the Secretary not fully recording the votes from each state. That needs to be done. This rule addresses that. If a delegate is bound by these rules, state party, or state law to vote for a candidate at the National Convention and demonstrates support under Rule 40, then such support shall not be recognized, except as provided by state law or state party rule. No presidential candidate shall have the power to remove the delegate. Draft of 1682. That was corrected at the convention. But the perception of that initial draft of 1682 is still out there in the internet, out in the ether, and we've got to address it. And I think we've adopted today language that squarely meets that problem and gives us something we can point to and say, yes, we are sending a signal. We are not going to let the presidential campaign come in and remove delegates. Yes, we are sending a signal. Votes will be accurately reported. But what's troubling about the Blackwell Amendment, in my opinion, is that it raises some very deep ethical problems about the use of power. To whom much is given, much is required. We have been given power under Rule 12 to make broad amendments to these rules. But the question is, how are we going to exercise that power? I mean, are we going to make a sweeping repudiation of the work of 112 people at the convention? The input, Mr. Blackwell and I debated at length at the convention. We debated each other. We debated other parts. We debated Mr. Ginsburg. Sometimes we won, sometimes we lost. That's sort of the nature of the political process. You don't win them all. But we won some. So I'm troubled by the idea that we're being called upon to pick up a sledgehammer and deal with a problem that is of very specific nature, of about 13 rules that have very specific consequences. That strikes me as excessive, that we are in the process of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. For instance, one of the amendments that would be lost is the amendment to Rule 16, let's see, what is it, F7, or is it C7? Anyhow, dealing with 16, let's see, what is it, F7, or is it C7? Anyhow, dealing with military voting. The procedure encourages the states to adopt procedures that encourage military voting. We don't want to lose that. That was a positive change. There's a technical fix in Rule 20C that prevents a problem that has existed, where the time for certification of delegates is the same as the time for filing contests of delegations. The convention fixed that by extending out the time for certification of delegates for 5 days, so there's a window within which you can file your contests. Without that, there's no way to effectively do it. It was a good change. It was a realistic change. It was the kind of convention committees do. They fix problems in the rules that we haven't caught in the previous 4 years. The final problem is one that is philosophical. I believe that conservatives rely on process. Liberals seek results. We believe as conservatives that if the rules are properly drawn, the result is just. Liberals have an Aristotelian concept of justice that is hanging out there, and they will keep adjusting the rules until they get that result that they're seeking. I would encourage this body to behave as conservatives. Follow process. Do what we are going to do under the leadership of Chairman Ash for the next 4 years, which is go through the rules, as we've done every 4 years. Rule by rule, line by line, correcting what's wrong, fixing what ought to be fixed, and dealing with the problems in an orderly, deliberate, and conservative fashion. And for all those reasons, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen, I would urge you to vote down the Blackwell resolution. Let's stick with the resolution that we adopted previously, which fixes 16A2, and let's move forward. Thank you.
David Sablon, National Committee man from Guam. I think the difference between the current Rule 16 as it's written now, was passed by the Convention of 2012, versus what Mr. Blackwell is proposing, in my opinion, is basically to protect the integrity of the delegates that committed to a certain candidate during their state primaries. I believe if we allow Mr. Blackwell's amendment to go through and change the language of 16, what it effectively would do is to allow campaigning at the convention for candidates to try to change the votes of some of these elected delegates who are supposed to be bound to a certain candidate as done in their primary in the states. I think that's the essence of what the difference is. And I think that would be against, in my opinion, that would be against a promise that was made to a certain candidate. And I think that's what Ben Ginsburg was trying to do, is to make sure that there's no campaign, because there were other candidates who were aggressively trying to win the nomination. And Ben said, you know, guys, in your primary, you said you were going to vote for my candidate or this candidate, stick with the program. And I think 16A, or 16 as it's written now, protects that integrity. And I think that's honorable, in my opinion. And so I do agree with Mr. Kent from Washington and what he said, with Dr. Fisher, with Mr. Barbour from Mississippi, and of course with Mr. Ryder as well, that I believe that we are protecting the voice of the grassroots when they leave their states to come to the convention, vote the way you're supposed to. And if it becomes a situation where there is a tie or whatever, then I think at that point it's very probable that we can release the candidates from their commitment and then make the best person win. But I don't think there should be any kind of campaigning done at the convention with delegates that are bound. Now, there are some states that allow for them to go and vote as they wish, and so be it. Those are the only ones that can actually change their votes, but not the others. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to take the time to ask that this motion be tabled because it's complicated. We do need to spend time on it, and it's good faith to all parties here. They're taking Mr. Ryder's point very seriously. We're a party of process. Let's process this, table this motion, study it carefully for the next meeting, and come to some resolution with this. Thank you.
Just one moment. There's a motion to lay on the table, and it is up for a vote, and it's non-debatable. I'll take a point of order. Mr. Smack, please go to the stand. And I need a second to Mr. Steele's laying on the table. Is there a second?
Yeah, we have the same point of order. There's already a motion on the table. A motion, yes. You have a motion to call the question, so you can't do the motion.
No, I'm sorry. Our rules say that you weren't recognized unless you're at the podium. You can't just call out from your chair. You're out of order.
You recognize him, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
And your general counsel says that I'm right.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move the rule of the chair.
1 second. Let's hear your point of order. I do want to get a second word. We're going to come back. We're going to hear Mr. Smack and Mr. Mascara if we need to on this. But I want to understand your point of order in order to extend fairness to you, sir.
My point of order is that Mr. Kent was recognized by the chair that he made a move. He had called the previous question. That was before you recognized the gentleman from Guam for an additional debate. At that point in time, the additional debate by the gentleman from Guam was out of order. The point of order is that Mr. Kent's motion to move the previous question was recognized by the chair. We should have immediately moved to a vote on the moving the previous question. Moving the previous question was declined, was defeated, then the National Committee man from Guam should have spoken at that point in time. This whole procedure at this point in time is kind of out of order.
I'm going to rule you out of order because the gentleman from Guam, it was really, it happened simultaneously.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to appeal the ruling of the chair.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest you ask Mr. Ryder, who would be sitting next to me, said that that was correct.
I'm not recognizing Mr. Ministerial at this moment. One moment, please.
And I second the gentleman's motion for appeal.
Point of order. 1 second. I'm going to deal with the point of order that's on the floor. We're not going to consider it's not well timed. The gentleman from Guam rose simultaneously. We heard his comment, and then there was a motion to lay this on the table. And
Can I speak to the point? It might be helpful.
go right ahead.
In my exuberance, and I apologize for that, I stood from my seat and made a call for the question. Would it be appropriate at this time for me to be able to withdraw that motion?
I'm going to call upon Mr. Bennett of Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, Warden Blackwell is probably one of my best members on this committee. I think he's one of the few members who's been on this committee longer than I have. And I can tell you that going through his proposal, there are a lot of things that I agree with. And I think that based upon the fact that there have been negotiations that have taken place, and it seems that we're making progress on some of those. And we made some progress this afternoon. I'm happy to second the motion to table this so that discussions may continue and that we can convene at the next meeting and perhaps have a resolution to this. Ohio is a grassroots party. If any of you have ever been to Ohio during a victory program, it involves massive grassroots in the support of not only our great governor, but also our presidential nominees. We don't always win. We're a competitive two-party state, and I never forget that. And we need everybody in the Republican Party. We need to build coalitions and we need to start building coalitions before we get to the election process. We need to do it right now for 2014. And if we do those things, we're going to win more elections. So I'm happy to second the motion to table this amendment until the next meeting.
There's a motion to lay the matter on the table. It is non-debatable. We will immediately go to a vote.
Record vote, please, Mr. Chairman. Yes,
Record vote. Excuse me, Mr. Blackwell, if you could come to the microphone and just clarify on what points you want the record vote on the motion to lay on the table.
Yes, the record vote on the motion to lay on the table, which would effectively defeat at this meeting my resolution. I think it's important enough that...
Is there, okay, thank you. Is there a second to Mr. Blackwell's motion?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there is a motion to lay on the table that has a second. That's non-debatable. Mr. Blackwell has made a motion to take a record vote, which has been seconded by Mr. Smack of Nevada. We now are going to vote on Mr. Blackwell's motion to take a record vote on laying this matter on the table. I'm sorry. Order.
Yeah.
Order.
I thought I heard that it was to table it with a resolution being brought at the next meeting, not just an indefinite table.
Right.
We're postponing to the next meeting. Mr. Smack, we're going to take a vote now. We're taking a vote now on creating a record vote to lay this matter on the table. All members in favor. We're taking Mr. Smack's point of order, then we'll take Mr. Ryder.
Mr. Chairman, you don't need to take a vote on making a record vote. It's a recommendation by members of the body, and all you need to do is make a decision on it, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Mr. Smack, you're wrong. It requires a vote, and we're going to take a vote on it. You're out of order. Thank you, Mr. Ryder.
My point of order is different, which is you described Mr. Steele's motion as a motion to postpone until the next meeting.
Lay on the table to the next meeting.
Well, now, there are two different motions. There's a motion to postpone consideration to a certain date or a motion to lay on the table. If the motion to lay on the table passes, then the only way to take it off the table is by a majority vote of the committee at a later meeting. That can be done at the later meeting or not, but that would require a separate motion. The motion to postpone consideration to a date certain is a different motion.
Let's get a clarification for Mr. Steele.
I really appreciate this information. I certainly did intend a motion to postpone this next regular meeting. That was my intent. That's my motion.
If there is let me just read you a motion to postpone until a certain time. The motion is debatable. In that discussion may occur as soon as when to bring the issue back up, but debate must be limited to the motion to postpone. So, is there any debate on the motion to postpone? Hearing none, we're going to move to yeah, that's what I'm going. I got a little bit of this. I can do this. We're now going to move to Mr. Blackwell's motion, which is to take a record vote on postponing this matter to the next meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Steele? That's correct. Okay. All those in favor of taking a record vote, that is a roll call vote, on the motion to postpone to the next meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
The motion passes to take a record vote. We are going to take a roll call vote, which the secretary will now start on, and this is a vote to postpone this matter to the next meeting. Madam Secretary, please proceed.
Alabama, Vicky Drummond. Alaska, Ralph Seekins. American Samoa, Anaka Broadway. No. Arkansas, Jonathan Barnett. No. California, Sean Steele.
Yes.
Colorado, Lily Nunez. Yes. Connecticut, Jerry Labriola.
Yes.
Delaware, Alan Ross.
No.
District of Columbia, Robert Kagan.
Yes.
Florida, Peter Feynman.
Yes.
Georgia, Randy Evans.
No.
Guam, Davidson Guam.
Yes.
Hawaii, David Shane.
Yes.
Idaho, David Watkins.
No.
Illinois, Demetra DeMonte. Yes. Indiana, John Hammond.
Yes.
Iowa, Steve Shepler.
No.
Kansas, Helen Vannetten. No. Kentucky, Casey Crosby. No. Louisiana, Ross Little. Maine, Mark Willis.
No.
Maryland, Louis Pope.
No.
Massachusetts, Ron Kaufman. Michigan, Terry Lynn Lane. No. Minnesota, Jeff Johnson.
No.
Mississippi, Henry Barbour.
No.
Missouri, Lance Beshore.
No.
Montana, Harold Galt.
Yeah.
Nebraska, David Kramer.
No.
Nevada, James Mack.
No.
New Hampshire, Steve Dupre.
Yes.
New Jersey, Bill Palatucci.
No.
Rhode Island, Helen Loeffler.
Proxy, no.
South Carolina, Glenn McCall.
No.
South Dakota, Dana Randall. Tennessee, John Ryder.
No.
Texas, Steve Mousteri.
No.
Utah, Enid Mickelson.
No.
Vermont, Jay Shepherd.
No.
Okay. Virginia, Morton Blackwell.
No.
Washington, Jeff Kent.
No.
West Virginia, Conrad Bluiett.
No.
Wisconsin, Greg Gordon.
No.
Wyoming, Greg Schaefer.
No.
What was that? No one left.
Wyoming thing. You do that.
Arizona, Bruce Ash.
No.
Noes have it.
Well, I'll give you a count.
Okay. One moment,
Mr. Chairman, with equal enthusiasm and now under proper protocol, I would like to move the previous question.
The motion is going to require a 2/3 vote and is undebatable. All those in favor of calling for the previous question, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. The motion to call the previous question is approved.
Mr. Chairman, I request a record vote on my, I was going to request the same thing, but from the microphone.
I recognize Mr. Blackwell because he's better looking than you.
But I'm bigger.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that vote, could I have a clarification? I've listened to all this, but what would be the final result here? I mean, everybody says we're going back to what we'd all recommended prior up to the convention, and everything that took place at the convention is gone, or what is the actual cutoff? I'd like a point of clarification.
Let me do that. Let me take care of a little housekeeping first. We need a second on the motion on the record. Okay. All those in favor of taking a record vote on the previous question being called, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We'll go to a record vote. We're going to go to a record vote on Mr. Blackwell's proposal, which has been made. That is what we're doing. We're taking a record vote on Mr. Blackwell's proposal, and to answer Mr. Seacon's question, that would take us back to the Standing Committee on Rules, the RNC Standing Committee on Rules proposal, which was adopted at the summer meeting of 2012 prior to the Tampa Convention. Okay.
Point of inquiry, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Saban.
A yes vote then would support Mr. Blackwell's motion.
Yeah, I'll get to that in just a second. Mr. Ryder, did you have a question?
No, I didn't know whether Mr. Seekins was seeking specific consequences of the Blackwell Amendment or the more general description. I I'm prepared to respond.
For the sake of clarification, one second. Because I want to be fair to everybody concerned. For the sake of clarification, we'll give Mr. Ryder 2 minutes to describe the consequences of what happens on this vote, and Mr. Blackwell 2 more minutes, because technically you were answering Mr. Steele's question. We limit debate times to 2 times per motion. So Mr. Ryder and then Mr. Blackwell will close out.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. You already have the motion passed to call the question, so no more debate is in order.
I would, Mr. Mascari, I would err in favor of making sure that every member of this room knew exactly what the consequences of their vote meant. I think there's a fair amount of confusion that may exist. Mr. Ryder, please proceed. You've got 2 minutes.
The changes that I was able to identify that would come about as a result of Mr. Blackwell's amendment are first, in 6B2, power of the executive committee to ratify new members. The previous standing committee on rules struck this language. There's a prohibition in 6B2 prohibits the executive committee from ratifying new members as they are elected. The standing committee on rules struck that language because that created a potential gap period between national committee meetings, during which there could occur a vacancy in the delegation, which then could be filled but not performed by the newly elected member. The convention reinstated that language. So Mr. Blackwell's amendment would take that language back out and restore it to the standing committee. In Rule 10A1, the Standing Committee on Rules did not address this issue. 10A1 was a provision adopted by the Rules Committee which embodied the procedures that Chairman Ash instituted during the last session of this Rules Committee, in which there was a request that proposed amendments be pre-submitted to the committee so they could be distributed to the members prior to the meeting. And those pre-submitted amendments would be considered first, and then any on-the-floor amendments would be considered subsequently. That language would be stricken by Mr. Blackwell's amendment. Rule 10A2 provides for the selection of the chairman of the Resolutions Committee by the RNC chairman under the provisions of Mr. Blackwell's amendment. That would revert to election of the chairman of the Resolutions Committee by the membership of the Resolutions Committee. Rule 10A3 is the chairman of the Budget Committee, the same thing. The convention proposal was appointment by the chairman of the RNC. Mr. Blackwell's amendment would revert to what the standing committee had recommended, which was election by the Budget Committee, which was a change from the prior.
Here are 2 minutes. I'll give you another minute, please.
Rule 10G creates a special commission to review convention procedures and make a report back to us at the spring meeting. Mr. Blackwell's amendment would strike that. Rule 11 was a loyalty oath for candidates that was recommended by the standing committee. It was struck by the convention. The Blackwell amendment would reinstate that. Rule 16A1, 16A, and 16A2, I think we've already discussed. Rule 16C2 is a requirement that states conducting primaries from March 1st to April 1st conduct them on a proportional basis. The language originally said shall be conducted in a proportional manner. The convention changed that to may. Mr. Blackwell would revert to shall, making that mandatory. Rule 16D7 encourages states to adopt procedures encouraging military participation. That was added by the convention. That would be stricken by Mr. Blackwell's amendment. Rule 16F3 deals with waivers for violations of 16A1 and 2. That language was added back in by the convention under the procedures we had adopted, or under the rules as adopted by the standing committee. That would be unnecessary. Mr. Blackwell will remove that language. 17F3 involves the discretionary penalties against a state which violates the calendar rules, which can be imposed by this committee involving housing, guest passes, and seating at the convention. Those were removed by the convention in light of the amendments to Rule 17A1, imposing very strict penalties on any state that violates the calendar, which are not subjective and not discretionary. Those penalties are a state that violates the calendar rules has its delegation reduced to 9 delegates plus the 3 members of the RNC. Rule 20C, I think I mentioned previously, that creates the gap period between certification of delegates and the time for filing contests, so that there actually is time for filing contests. Under Mr. Blackwell's amendment, that language would, both dates for certification and contest would be 30 days, which renders filing of contest essentially invalid. So those are the changes I was able to identify.
The chair has erred. I thought it would take 2 minutes. It took a lawyer 4 minutes and 37 seconds. Mr. Blackwell, you'll have 4 minutes and 37 seconds if you care to reply. Not to rehash debate, but those items, speaking to those items.
The descriptions that Mr. Ryder made of the effect of what my amendment would do are basically correct. There are many things that he didn't mention, but those I think are the major ones. I put it forth in the context of making a sweeping demonstration and then going back later, and there are many of these changes about which we could reach consensus. Certainly, Mr. Ryder and I reached consensus on almost all of these just this afternoon, but his description was a good lawyerly description of what would happen, and I thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. We're now going to immediately go to a record vote by the Secretary of the Party. And a yes vote would support Mr. Blackwell's amendments, and a nay vote would vote against them at this time.
Alabama, Vicki Drummond. Yes. Alaska, Ralph Seegan. American Samoa, Amada Radway. Arkansas, Jonathan Barnett.
Proxy, Rita Hamilton, no.
California, Sean Steele. California, Sean Steele.
Retract that, please. I'm voting for more.
You are. You are for more. California, Sean Steele.
Yes.
Colorado, Lily Union. Connecticut, Jerry Labriola.
No.
Delaware, Ellen Barras. District of Columbia, Robert Cable.
No.
Florida, Peter Feynman.
Yes.
Georgia, Randy Evans.
No.
Guam, David Sablon.
No.
Hawaii, David Shane.
No.
Idaho, David Watkins.
No.
Illinois, Demetra DeMonte. No. Indiana, John Hammond.
No.
Iowa, Steve Shuffler.
Yes.
Kansas, Helen Burnett. Yes. Kentucky, Casey Crosby. Yes. Louisiana, Ross Little. Yes. Maine, Mark Willis.
Yes.
Maryland, Willis Pope.
No.
Massachusetts, Ron Kaufman.
No.
Michigan, Terry Lynn Grant.
Yes.
Minnesota, Jeff Johnson.
Yes.
Mississippi, Henry Barbour.
No.
Missouri, Lance Bishop.
No.
Montana, Errol Gall.
No.
Nebraska, David Kramer.
Yes.
Nevada, James Smith.
Yes.
New Hampshire, Steve Duquesne.
No.
New Jersey, Bill Belichucci.
No.
New Mexico, Pat Rogers.
No.
New York, Jennifer Rich.
Roxy, no.
North Carolina, Ada Bishop. Thank you, Ada. North Dakota, Missouri Fundayatis. No. Rhode Island, Carol Mumford.
Roxy?
South Carolina, Glenn McCall.
No.
South Dakota, Dan Randall. Tennessee, John Ryder.
No.
Texas, Steve Monastery.
Texas votes yes.
Utah, Enid Mickelson. No. Vermont, Jay Shepard.
No.
Virgin Islands, Liliana Velardo de O'Neill. Virginia, Morton Blackwell.
Yes.
Washington, Jeff Kent.
No.
West Virginia, Conrad Lucas.
Yes.
Wisconsin, Greg Courtney.
Yes.
Wyoming, Craig Schaefer.
Yes, and no vote.
Arizona, Bruce Ash.
Yes. This moment will have the results of the vote. The results are yes, 25, no, 28. Motion failed. Now recognize Dr. Ada Fisher of North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, as I was very reluctant to cast the vote as I did, and I would like to move for the agenda that we put on the each agenda the discussion of rules and particular trouble. And since we only have so many in an election cycle, I would suggest we take these first 12 rules as the first order of business in the next meeting to look at. The second meeting after that, to take Rule 13 through 25, and a third meeting, Rule 26 through 42. That follows the logical order that you have. But it would be a disservice for us to not discuss these rules because there's so much confusion.
Thank you, Dr. Fisher. The chair takes that under advisement, and I can tell you that we're already going in that direction. Chair recognizes Jeff Johnson from Minnesota. Mr. Johnson, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My hope was that I wouldn't have to bring my motion because one of the first two would have taken care of it. That did not happen today. So this is a very targeted strike on the rules. Several people have mentioned that really 16A2 was the only part that was problematic for people, but 16A1 is actually quite problematic for some of us in certain states. And what 16A1 essentially says is that any state that uses a presidential preference poll or a straw ballot, as we do in Minnesota at our caucuses in order to get people there, we have to then find and allocate our delegates based upon that. Somebody could certainly make an argument.
Okay, if we could just get a second to your motion and then second for Mr. Smack of Nevada. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Certainly someone can make an argument that that would be a wise way to choose our delegates, but I don't believe that the RNC should be telling us that that is how we should have to do it, or telling any other state that that is how they should have to do it. So as we barely didn't take Mr. Blackwell's approach to fixing the rules and instead we'll take a look at each of these more thoughtfully and individually, here's our first chance to do that.
Is there a discussion on Mr. Johnson's proposal? Mr. Blackwell.
I totally support his proposal. I do not believe it is appropriate for national party rules or for the national committee or this rules committee to tell state parties that if they have caucuses, they have to make it binding. It doesn't make sense. And the state ought to have the authority to select their delegate in any reasonable, fair way, and whether a caucus is binding or not does not go to the point of fairness. It's the selection of the delegates. So I think this is almost a no-brainer. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional, Mr. Hogler?
Mr. Chairman, Curly Howell from North Dakota, since it's a no-brainer, I think I can feel qualified. I support this amendment because it does in fact remove one of the conflicts that I tried to call your attention to earlier when I objected to the consideration of the question. The reason I was objecting to the consideration of the question is because we have a rule already, Rule 37, that prohibits binding of delegates. And the elimination of this paragraph will further that objective, and we will not have binding of delegates, which is contrary to our rules right now.
Thank you. Who's that? Mr. Kramer?
David Kramer, National Committee Man from Nebraska. This is a really point of information or maybe some explanation. If a particular state that currently elects everybody via convention, for example, can we choose to do away with the statewide primary if our legislature is willing to do that and still elect by convention? With no apportionment ordered by anything? Because there would be in that instance no mechanism.
Mr. Felipe, you go ahead and respond.
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, but if there's no presidential preference vote, then there's no requirement to bind the delegates.
And at that point, the state party can decide by state party rule or by state statute how they choose to do that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bennett?
Mr. Chairman, members, as I stand up in opposition to this, you know, we've just gone through a debate on what is good for the grassroots. And we start with Iowa and the caucus. If you take a survey of Republicans in Ohio and probably throughout the country, they will tell you that the Iowa caucus is binding. We know that it is not. You know, we know that they can select their delegates later on, and they're always on the right side. But it doesn't go to what the grassroots in Iowa voted on at their caucuses. And it seems to me that if we're talking about the support of the grassroots, that it's important that the grassroots understand that if they participate in a caucus, it's going to mean something. It's going to mean something when they choose their presidential delegates to the convention. And to use the caucus to get over on the presumptive winner is, I think, just wrong. In Ohio, we have a primary. That primary bangs the delegates to that presidential nominee who participates in there. And so I'm opposed to this rule change because I think that it's important that we support the grassroots and their efforts when they go to those caucuses.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Barbour.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Henry Barbour from Mississippi. You know, one of the things that most political parties want to do, they want to have more people participate, not less. And I think having, you know, what some people refer to as beauty pageants is not helpful to growing our party. I think it does confuse voters. People go to the polls, they think their vote matters. And in fact, in some states, you'll have hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million people go vote in a primary, only to find out that the voice of those primary voters can be taken away by people who show up at a state convention a month or two later. And I think that is not a smart way to grow the party. I also think, you know, when we think about 2016 and when we win the White House back, which obviously everybody would like us to do, as campaigns have to look at the schedule and look at where they're going to campaign, and they're looking at each state, and they've got only so much resources. It's very hard for them to make a decision to go to a state that has non-binding primary or caucus, because they're going and there's no assurance that whatever vote happens there means anything. That's a pretty fundamental point that opposes this. And I will say, there are some who say, this is top down, but when it comes to proportionality, it seems okay at that point to try to force on states how they run their primaries.
Mr. Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I think people have different opinions as to whether this is the right way to do it or not. My point is, since we have different opinions, maybe the RNC shouldn't be dictating to states how we have to do it. Let us have that discussion ourselves.
Is your question's been called? I need. I'm sorry. You need to come to the microphone.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to my counterpart from Ohio, people may have wanted to see different results, but I still believe that states ought to have that autonomy to choose their delegates as they wish. And quite frankly, with no disrespect to the Santorum campaign, the Romney campaign in Iowa, they didn't do their job. I sat in a caucus of 178 people on caucus night. And the very first part of the business was to have a straw poll and a vote. And I made the comment several times that when we are done with this, you need to stay and you need to go through the process in terms of getting yourself elected as a delegate to the county convention, which of course goes on to the district and state commission, and also elect central committee members and the debate platform planks. And I repeated that twice. And when that straw poll was conducted, around 20 to 25 people stayed for business. So my point is, people that are involved in the grassroots should be able to choose those delegates. And again, with no disrespect to other campaigns, they didn't do their job. And so again, you may not like the results that you saw in Iowa, but in all due respect, states should be allowed to do what they want, not dictated by this body. Thank you.
I believe that the various viewpoints of this have been adequately addressed when I move the previous question.
Required a 2/3 vote. All those in favor?
I second his motion.
Second by Mr. Smack. All those in favor, calling for the previous question, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. We'll move directly to a vote on Mr. Johnson's amendment on 16A3. A1. All those in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Nay. Division's been called. All those in favor, please stand. Did we get everybody counted? Okay, please have a seat. All those opposed, please stand. The ayes appear to have it. Keep standing if you're... The ayes have it, 31 to 20. Are there any other pieces of business that have to come before this committee today? Actually, before I entertain a motion to adjourn, and this is really an answer to Dr. Fisher's request as well as I think the overall sense that everybody has here is that we have a lot of work to do. We're going to be looking at appointing a subcommittee of this committee in order to better study how we're going to be looking at various rules amendments under Rule 12. And appointments will be coming shortly. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion. Jerry Labriola and seconded by Enid Mickelson. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.